So these are two special types of angles. Two angles that add together to make 180 degrees, or two angles that add together to make 90 degrees. They have special names, okay? Two angles that add together, page 544 now, that add together to 90 degrees are called complementary angles. Complementary angles add together to make 90 degrees. Supplementary angles are two angles that add together to make 180 degrees. Okay? When they are adjacent, right, when they share one side, that's what adjacent angles are. Supplementary angles will add together to make a straight line. And complementary angles will add together to make a 90-degree right angle. Okay? So these are special names for these types of angles, these pairs of angles. Remembering which is sometimes a problem for people. So there's two ways to remember that I use to remember. One is that they're in alphabetical order. Okay? Complementary is 90. Supplementary, which comes later in the alphabet, is 180. That's one way to remember. The other way to remember is complementary angles make a corner, 90 degrees, and supplementary angles make a straight line. Supplementary, straight line, complementary, corner. All right, so what you need to be able to do is two things here. First, identify whether angles are supplementary or complementary, whether pairs of angles are supplementary or complementary. Okay, so angle 1 and angle 2 here, they form a straight line when you add them together. Therefore, they are supplementary angles. You don't even have to know what their measurements are. You can tell that they add together to make 180 degrees. Or sometimes you're given the measurements of the angles, and they don't have to be adjacent. 30 degrees and 60 degrees, those add together to make 90 degrees, which means that these two angles are complementary. Okay? They're usually adjacent in the pictures that you see, but they don't have to be, right? As long as you can add up the two angles and they add up to 90, they're complementary. If they add up to 180, they're supplementary. Got it? All right, so you should be able to answer these two questions.
Where are you?
Okay, letter A, supplementary, complementary, or neither. Jack Stanton. Neither, because these two angles do not add up to 180 degrees. They add up to 175 degrees. Not 180, therefore the answer is neither. Letter B, Blake. Complementary, because 75 plus 15 is 90. So these two angles are complementary. Okay, so identifying whether angles are supplementary or complementary. Then, if you know that two angles are complementary or supplementary, and you know the measure of one of the angles, then you can find the measure of the other angle, which reminds me that you can use a calculator for this whole unit. You will need one. You need to have a handheld calculator. It makes the problems go way faster. And that's important. You don't want to be spending a lot of time doing arithmetic on paper. Take out your calculator, which you should have with you. If you do not have one, you need to get one since the first day of school. $2 at Job Lot. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to add and subtract and multiply and divide, basically, for now. Okay? So, in the book, these problems have a lot of algebra pieces to them. Okay, instead of just asking you what is the measure of this angle, right, which would be the sort of more straightforward question, what is the measure of angle CBD? The measure of angle CBD, Okay, then instead they give you this little algebra expression in there and ask you for what is the value for x. And then they do it with an algebra equation. You do not have to do this for this chapter. Okay, I'm not going to worry about the algebra parts of this unit too much. You don't have to set up the algebra equation to find the answer to this question. You can do it sort of in the 5th grade mental method, right? What is the measure of angle CBD? These two angles together make 90 degrees. So what am I going to do, Jack, to find the measure of this angle? Yeah, 90 minus 28. That's all you have to do. Subtract the angle you know from 90 if they make a right angle. And that equals 62 degrees. Then you can go to, okay, so 2x is 62 degrees. That means x has to be half of that, or 31 degrees. Next example. These two angles shown are supplementary, and you can tell they're supplementary because they make a straight line when you add them together. Again, I'm not so concerned that you know what x is, more importantly, what is the value, what is the measure of this angle right here? If they are supplementary, then I do 180 minus 123, and that equals 57 degrees. So this angle is 57 degrees. If that's 3 times x, then x has to be 19. Divide 57 by 3. I don't particularly like this example. Too much algebra, not enough angles. Jack? Yeah, each one of these have to be equal, and they have to add up to 90 degrees, which means 2 times x has to equal 90 degrees, so x has to be 45. The key to these problems, if two angles are complementary, subtract from 90 the angle you know, and that gives you the other angle. If they're supplementary, then you do 180 minus the angle that you know. Then they go on to show some goofy real-world pictures with some complementary and supplementary angles in them. This picture actually looks like this. This is 80 degrees, and the question is, what is this angle right here? Someone besides Jack and Jack. Jordan, what is the measure of this angle right here? These two angles are supplementary, right? They make a straight line, which means they add up to how many degrees? Mikey? Nope. Oh, the angle is 100, right? The two angles together add up to 180 degrees. This is the number you've got to know. 180 and 90. Those are the two key numbers. If these two angles add up to 180, then this angle is 180 minus 80, making it 100 degrees. Then they say over here, well, it's 10x, so x is 10. I don't really care about the algebra part so much. Okay? All right, what's the measure of this angle in the scissors then? Go ahead and do that one.
You get sent all the way to the office. What I want to be sent to the office. No.
All right, what am I going to do for this problem? How do I find the measure of this angle, Hadley?
We do 180 minus 116.
That's it. 180 minus 116. That equals 64. Jordan?
Oh, I didn't say next one.
Oh, go ahead.
64 divided by 8.
Correct. So x equals 8. Okay, for the extra part of this. But you'll notice, if you notice on that worksheet that you're going to work on now, that None of them have these X things in there. They're just asking you what the measurements are of these angles, okay? Probably enough time here. Number one, these two angles add up to 180 degrees. Therefore, these two angles are supplementary. These two angles add up to 90 degrees. Therefore, they are complementary. This angle is 180 minus 45 because they make a straight line. 180 minus 45. One 180 minus 45 is 135 degrees. Thank you, Jack.
That took like 10 minutes.
Welcome.
Who else needs this worksheet?
All right, copyrighted.
Okay, so this is 180 minus 128 would be this answer right here. Okay, use your calculator. That's 52 degrees. So the answer to number 5 is 52 degrees. Over here, if you find 52 degrees, there's a letter next to it. That's the letter you put in block 5 at the bottom. Let's talk about this picture though real quick, because this is a reminder of what was in the lesson from Friday that maybe you didn't do. Angles, these angles are made by two lines intersecting, right? Two lines intersecting, and there are 4 angles made when that happens. These angles that are directly across from each other are called what kind of angles? Jack? They are not adjacent. Adjacent angles are right next to each other. These two angles would be adjacent. They share a side. Okay, so that's adjacent angles, which was one of the definitions from Friday. Okay, so angle 7 and angle 8 are adjacent. They're also supplementary, right? Because they add together to make 180 degrees. Okay, angles 8 and angle 80 are what kind of angles? What is their relationship? It starts with a V. Jack Stanton. They are vertical angles. Okay, so angle 7 and angle 9 are vertical angles. So are angles 8 and 80. Why does that matter? Because what is the relationship between two vertical angles? The measures of two vertical angles. What do you know about these two measures, Jack? They're equal. Vertical angles are congruent, which means they are the same measure. Vertical angles are congruent. Okay, this was the lesson, part of the lesson from Friday, which means what is the measure of angle 8? If this angle is 80 degrees, and these angles that are right across from each other are congruent, then angle 8 is 80 degrees, right? There's no calculation to be done at all. And then what's the measure of angle 7? This is supplementary with angle 8, right? Or with this angle. So how do I get this measurement? Jeannie, how do I get the measure of this angle right here? It's supplementary with this angle that's 80 degrees. What do I know about two angles that are supplementary? What do they add up to? 180 degrees. So what is the measure of angle 7? You can't do 180 minus 80 in your head? Jeannie? Thank you. Okay, now some of the math you can't do in your head, I get, but that one you should have been able to do in your, and you were able to do it in your head, right? 180 minus 80. What's the measure of angle 9? 100 degrees. It's vertical with angle 7, right? So for each of these pictures, there's really not that much calculation to do. You just have to